And so we'll call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of the Land Use Working Group Subcommittee on Public Works. It's Thursday, October 16th at 4 o'clock. And we're meeting by Zoom, and this meeting will be recorded for future use. And so I'm going to take a roll call. Rob Almeida.
Here.
And I am here, Linda Miller, and our third member, which I had hoped to introduce today, Matt Boger, can't be with us. So we'll just move through this with the two of us and some very honored guests. And that includes Russ Carlstead, who's the facility manager for the town, and Sven Weber and Judith Grant Long, I see, both who are co-chairs of the Land Use Working Group, and hopefully we'll be able to contribute quite a bit to get our group moving forward. And I see also Carrie LaFleur, town manager, and Linda Escobedo. Thank you very much for joining us. So the first order of business, I think, will be approval of minutes for September 10th, 2025, our last meeting. Did you have any comments on those minutes, Rob?
No. I'll put forward a motion to, unless you have any comments.
No. So if you want to move, and I'll
put forward a motion to approve the minutes from September. Sorry, what day was it again? Sorry.
September 10th, 2025.
Sorry, September 10th, 2025, as is.
Okay, I second that, and we'll take a roll call vote. Rob?
Yeah.
And I, yes, as well. We were going to have a discussion of the organization of our subcommittee and charge and so on, but I think I'd like probably to defer that until we can be a full committee. So I think that hopefully our next meeting we'll be able to decide on a regular meeting schedule and so on. So I will just ask, I think Shannon has joined us as well, and perhaps Shannon can then send us again a poll so that we can hopefully get a full group at our next meeting. And I would suggest that that would be in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Would that be okay, Shannon?
Yep, that's fine.
Thanks so much. So then I think we'll move on to the question of continuing the assessment of needs in terms of moving forward for looking at facilities for public works. And I think last meeting we talked about a full component of the public works facilities. And I think now we probably have focused more to the 133, 135 Kais Road site. And I don't know, Russ, if you have any thoughts and input that you have been able to work on that. I know you have been working with Alan full-time on extra full-time on with all of the groups here, but I wondered, we were hoping to get some ability to drill into compared to the facilities study that was done in 2019, any changes and updates there in terms of requirements for that site and or a new site for public works.
I took the 2017 or 2018 notes from the director of grounds and highway, and I was going over those with Aaron, and we haven't finished that yet. I was out for a couple of days for personal reasons, a week or so ago, so I'm a little behind. But I'm going to compile that and get some numbers back. and see where it's different. I think there's more vehicles, there's a few more people, that kind of thing, and, their group grew as facilities shrank, so. Yeah, there are some changes, not huge, but there are some that we need to take a look at.
Okay, so in terms of, that group and the campus, I just want to discuss like what areas might be in the municipal consolidation segment versus the public works, sort of operational issues, operational component.
Yeah, right now, there has been no talk of any of the public works groups, with the exception of facilities, to go into the consolidation bucket, so to say. I don't, we've been here to have that conversation. So Alan's online, he can speak to that as well.
Okay, I haven't seen Alan. Oh yeah, I see Alan. And also I see a hand up from Sven. So,
Yeah,
Sven.
on that, I believe that the planning department, which doesn't say sit officially on campus, but that building and these people, that is part of the consolidation group discussion. So if you look at that lot and the whole area, the planning department is something that is up to discussion to be potentially somewhere else.
That would be the 141 Kais.
Correct.
Yeah.
As opposed to the 133, 135.
Yeah, but if you look at that as a campus, you have to have that in mind.
Certainly. Okay. And Alan, did you have thoughts there as well?
I'm sorry, Linda, I was having technical difficulties, so I had to get out to get back in so I could get on screen. So what's the question? I didn't hear the question.
I think that the question is, as we look at 133, 135 and the functionality of that building, would any of those functions logically move towards the municipal consolidation group? That is, would it make sense for engineering to be with the building department and facilities, as opposed to with the operational side of streets?
It would be less favorable. The way public works functions, in fact, even including facilities to some degree, having Russ available allows for greater continuity. There's a lot of crossover from our operations and maintenance, which is the fleet and heavy equipment, and the design and engineering, which is the capital related, planning and execution. So that is more ideal to have the connections. In fact, even internally, we've gone through some changes in our layout to allow for that integration. Engineering near highway grounds has worked out very well. For instance, the area that we have had support, like sort of integral support to us in the past, is related to some administrative functions. There's some finance. We get support from the town finance department that's integral with procurement and that sort of thing. So there's a connection that we have, with an external entity, as well as a municipal light plant. There has been a lot of overlap in the past with our metering and billing software systems. So there's some crossover there that could be advantageous, but I wouldn't say I could see dividing our units. I don't see an advantage, And in fact, even with facilities, we've never really had the operations group. They haven't had the space to be on this campus. I would believe it'd be better if they were as an operations group with their equipment and, operation. So I just throw it out there as, in an ideal world, and Russ, you can speak to this, but we've never had the luxury. First Facilities is relatively new to town as far as a operations group, only about 5 years old. And since their inception, they really have not had a landing place that's made sense. It's been more adapted. And Russ, I don't know if you want to speak to that, but I don't know, because I've never had them under our roof, and they were only in Public Works charge in the past 2 years. We're still kind of learning a little bit on that. But Russ, do you have any thoughts on the facility side?
We really could be anywhere. It makes sense to share some uses like the admin that Alan spoke about, things like that. And then when you look into actual environmental considerations of a building, the pieces of the building, if you have needs for restrooms and lockers and that stuff. So if you have that already available and they can take use of it, it's good on that way operationally. But yeah, the team has never had one spot to be or call home. So that's why, we're going to be over Peabody temporarily. And we're going to see how that works out and how that improves or ruins us. I think it'll improve us. But yeah, so we could be anywhere, but if we would stay on the campus, that's fine also. But if someone has to get squeezed out, we can be squeezed out.
It's gonna be a lot of squeezing no matter where we all end up, I have a feeling, but yeah.
It's
Okay.
interesting. Russ and I had a conversation, might be helpful, a little bit of learning from, his history. I don't know if everybody understands that at one point, the 133, that's the area where Highway Grounds is predominantly occupying. At one point, that was, Highway Grounds, Engineering, Administration, Director's Office. Water Sewer was in 141 Keyes Road, the brick building. That was originally where they were. It was an operations-centric facility. And the light plant, municipal light plant, occupied 135 Keyes Road, which is where water sewer is predominantly. And that was till the mid 1990s. And that's when the light plant then moved to their current location over on, by the Rotary. And water sewer moved back, and we were sort of temporarily, they improved 141 and brought in the land management group. And water sewer was temporarily, we talked about leasing property by the depot. When I first hired, I was on Love Lane. It was an odd setup, but they were temporarily leasing so we could make accommodations to the old light plant to bring water sewer over here. So it's just interesting. So the light plant used this building until they outgrew it. And you can see where they moved and the kind of use they have. So just for perspective, it's not that long ago, we've seen this sort of shuffling of service groups. Just perspective, I don't know, Linda, if you recall those, if you were around when that was happening. I'm not sure everybody remembers this.
Yeah, I was around, but not aware.
Yeah.
At that, yeah.
And Alan, actually, when CMLP was over here, we had actually more open acreage to work from. Some of that's been scaled back over the years. If I can share my screen from it, I can show everyone the picture of when CMLP was here. If you think it's interesting.
Russ, can you try sharing it? I don't know if
Let me give it a shot. Hang on.
I don't know if I have privileges to allow you to.
Well, Shannon's here, so I think we're.
All right, so that's it right there.
Okay, there you go. Interesting.
So you can see back here, A
Wow.
lot more square footage back here and on this side. And
Yep.
this is CMLP and all their transformer storage way out here, and I mean, really encroaching onto where it shouldn't be. And so
Russ,
this is
note the old panels from the 70s, the solar
right
panel
there. There
on
you
the
go.
garage. Yes. Yeah, and you can see they encroached beyond. So I know when the site and campus was reconfigured and retooled, we delineated the resource area with fencing and barriers that you see now. But back then, if you look where the transformers are in the upper, right section, that's kind of off limits at this point. But yeah, it's a good example of what it was, and this would have probably been indicative of, the probably early 90s.
Yeah, there's no date on the image. All right, let me stop that share.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if we're trying to come up with a short list of sites that would be suitable, where shall we begin?
Well, I know what I've heard in some of the questions, and I think we have to go through a little bit more understanding, just to eliminate or at least identify they were considered, right? So what I've heard, and there hasn't been a lot of follow-up because really with this subcommittee, there just hasn't been the time and an opportunity yet. There was potential interest in what, if any, expansion could exist or be done over at the existing wastewater treatment plant, because that's a large parcel. I'm not saying how advantageous it is, but that's something that, have we looked, I think needs to be, considered. There's been discussion, obviously, on 2229 Main Street. There's been discussion on MCI redevelopment. And there really hasn't been any other sites that have been discussed, but we really haven't had, we haven't delved into how creative can we get, I think is really the issue. Those are the more obvious campuses we've heard. Sven, you might have heard something else, or?
Yeah, I think that the one always to put on is the current status where you are
Oh,
today.
correct.
And
Thank you.
then of that, there's a sub scenario, let's say current status plus, which means is plus potentially 141 guys if they move out, and the Concord Oil stuff.
Yeah, and that's private. So that
Yeah,
would
but
be,
it's a scenario to think about if the current location plus some room
correct.
would be possible.
Yep, and that's right. The study from 2020 or 19, whenever, did identify modifications to the campus. Well, maybe not ideal, to contemplate to expand some garage area, build up second, 2 stories, for instance, at 135. So, and then there was other considerations I know in that study of completely level 133, 135 and rebuild. That was contemplated because at that point, there really were no other sites that were available to consider.
Has there been consideration for the current light plant site that is putting a second floor there and or moving to the state? I don't know if the state would grant us any land, but they do have the land abutting the light plant.
Yeah, that would be the next frontier. We haven't explored that in any length. I've never heard a discussion on expand the light plant facility for public works. That's a discussion I've never heard. Doesn't mean it couldn't be considered. And I know the campus over there has some limitations because we were looking at siting a water treatment facility in that area behind the gas station where the spoils pile for construction in Acton right now exists. That is our primary location for a water treatment facility, but that would be a standalone facility that's not for operations other than drinking water. But and then the other issue is, Linda, when the state's looking at reconfiguration of the Rotary, I do know, and we've had conversations, that they are looking beyond existing property lines to try and do a best fit for a reconfiguration, with an understanding that there may need to be land taking, including a part of the land that the municipal light plan exists, but also the state property as well. So I think the state understands there may be some changes in the in property lines to accommodate a larger project for the Rotary.
Carrie, you had your hand up. Did you want to comment?
I actually was just going to make sure the last 2 points that Alan made were put on the table. So thank you.
Okay.
Great
I
minds think alike.
quick. So just a question to Alan. If, let's say, there is a scenario with the Rotary reconfiguration, they would take land that sits between CMLP and the Rotary. But on the other side of CMLP, there's quite a big lot that the state owns. Could that be a swap, and could that lot be something? Because that's, I think, 8+ acres or so. Or is that just too off with how it's connected?
So I will volunteer that, and it's not, things are so conceptual. I've raised the idea that we had sort of identified that area for a water treatment facility. I think we could possibly contemplate a swap of land, and I would suggest to the more to the property that's now the farm. That would make sense on 2A. I don't know the area we're talking. That would be for a water treatment facility. It would actually make a lot of sense. That could be, we could both benefit with something like that. I think the issue of, I'm just using 14 acres as that conceptual, ideal area for public works. I don't know how amenable they'd be to that, so, but there's been no conversation about that.
Rob, do you have any?
Yeah, I was gonna mention one thing we talked about early on, and I had asked about. There is land across from the existing wastewater plant on Reformatory Branch on that trail over there. That's currently leased, I believe, as farmland, but it's town owned. Did we ever find out what that lease, what's that lease look like?
Yeah, we're very familiar with that, and it's for a term. Presently, it's been used for organic farming. It's been administered through the NRC, but I'm not exactly sure. I don't know the history as to why, but I do know it's, to be mindful, a very high interest agriculture use, but it is not restricted for agriculture use. It's literally municipal land that we've been leasing to allow for agriculture. Originally, as part of the original wastewater campus. There are issues over there just to be mindful of. There's always environmental, whether it's water resource. There are issues over there with rare endangered species we'd have to be mindful of. The blanding turtle of notable prominence, but it doesn't, that's not a showstopper. That can be mitigated, but just to be aware of.
I mean, that's already town-owned land, I just don't know again, what's the town tied into for the lease right now? Are we talking 5 years, 10 years, a year?
It's fairly
Okay.
short term. I think it's, I hear the ask, we'll get the answer, but it's not 10 years. I think it was 3 if I remember, but I don't remember when it was last renewed.
And what about the landfill area? Is there any thought of
Okay.
that?
Yeah. So the landfill area, and we haven't had much conversation about that. It's been very active. Again, formerly a landfill with a landfill that was closed. So there's a certain area that is sort of under the solar array that's not today developable, but I would argue in 100 years, who knows what. But it's a large area. We presently actively use it for management of yard waste materials, storm debris, snow piles, very active for our compost. We are looking to accommodate a cell tower. There was a cell tower historically. They're looking at, leasing, some area on that campus for a cell tower in the short term. And we also believe there may be opportunities for some of the public works use, at least that are problematic on this site. For instance, we have cardboard dumpsters that people have access to, which we're contemplating should probably be relocated, and we probably bring them over to that site. So we're looking at expanding some of our operation over there just so that we can, manage the needs of the town, cardboard, styrofoam. It wouldn't be a transfer station, but it would have some additional use for needs of the town that we can't really accommodate on this campus. But we talked about bringing cardboard over and maintaining the yard waste compost area. It's used for temporary storage right now for winter maintenance equipment, plows and that sort of thing, off season. So, because we don't have the space on this campus. So I think those are the more active uses over there. I will also volunteer to this group. There has been a very strong interest from the Walden Woods
Mhm.
group to put a conservation restriction on that, to purchase a restriction. They've been very interested in this for, as long as I can remember, over 20 years. And every 5 to 7 years, there seems to be a renewed interest. And, I know they're very political. They want to see that area restricted and preserved. So that's just, something to be aware of. But Public Works has been very historically adamant about the value and need of its current use for the town benefit, because it's really hard to find a place where we can do that kind of thing, centrally located, that's convenient to the main road, all that stuff. So there's always been that. There's a story there, but just to know, those are some of the competing interests over at the landfill, former landfill. And the light plant is looking to, presently on their radar, expand the solar array. And they're also contemplating a battery storage over on that campus as well. I've talked to Jason Bulger about that. Just he's teased that. We don't have anything to go with, but that's on the municipal light plant's radar.
Would it be possible to think of other locations like 2229 for those functions? And then if you were able to offload those functions from 135, 133 Kais Road, would that eliminate the sort of safety congestion concerns with having the public mixing with your operations on that landscape?
Yeah, I think there's something to that. It's interesting. I think when they did the study that was completed in 2020, I'm not sure there's a lot of attention on that conflict. And I don't think they really put a lot of emphasis on the protection and control of the active operations area. Yeah, I don't think it was ever given a lot of attention. And the cardboard activity, I just don't, I think it's ramped up since, just before COVID. I mean, it really is an odd, it's the volume increased during COVID and people know about it and it's not well controlled. And it is interesting. I will note just to this group, since we've improved our solid waste recycling program to allow for larger bins for cardboard, there has been a reduction, but it's not eliminated. There's still a demand. But that did help offset some of that impact. But we are presently looking at a cost burden for the town that we think, should not be ongoing, service without, sort of control. And that's why putting it somewhere like the landfill, that could be a fee to actually benefit from that. That's on our radar.
Okay. So again, if we're, well, we really haven't talked about MCI Concord, in terms of, sort of with the primary objective is wastewater, increasing wastewater treatment. And I guess a secondary objective could be the administrative use of that land, but I don't know if we have any kind of assessment of what the two different uses would require in terms of footprint there. I mean, we haven't talked about that in terms of the land use working group. I don't believe.
Correct. There's been an ask, and we can share with you that the advisory board had requested some better understanding. They're aware of a potential benefit to the town for municipal use. So, and specifically on the public works, they've asked for some preliminary, what does that actually mean? And so we are working with an architect who, Russ, you can speak to, the kind of plan of work or something that they might be able to do to give us a sense of what would that look like as far as not, you can describe what that work could entail. And I know we've got a request, and we were going to, talk with Carrie and determine if there's, funds available to do that assessment, but we know it's time sensitive. And we also know DCAM is equally interested. So Russ, what was the actual planning level? You can describe it appropriately.
So, excuse me. Much like we did over at Peabody, it would be a space assessment to see if the functions would fit into existing infrastructure over at MCI. There are 3 buildings that are of interest to us. That have a high probability of functioning well. So I have reached out to DCAM for plans of these buildings. We've reached out to the same architect that did the space analysis at Peabody to get us a proposal, which we have in hand today, and we'll share with Carrie and Megan after I get off of this. And what we'll do is we'll take all the new updated information we have. We will look at it, how it would work in the existing infrastructure, see if it fits, and maybe come up with a couple assumptions of maybe architectural remedies we may be short, or maybe we have too much. So it's really a high level. We all know there's going to be an environmental assessment over there in those buildings, so we're not going to look at that. We know that that's a fact. So it's basically see if we can fit in there, and if it will operate efficiently for the town for the use expected.
Russell, I do have a question with that. When you're going through this process, do we need to look at utility relocates, especially for power, given that, once if we do go down this path of taking those three buildings and then trying to open up the remaining, campus up for development, what's that going to look like? Obviously, we don't want to, have to reconfigure power, 3 or 4 times, going through, through the process.
Yeah, Rob, that's a great question. In fact, I will share, they are, DCAM, DOC is already working with the light plant to reconfigure the power supply for the wastewater facility. They know that has to be modified. So
Mhm.
there's active conversations, but we haven't, I guess that might, us going through this preliminary assessment might inform that conversation. So I think that's why they're interested to know what, kind of planning level should we be considering, but we haven't had that conversation other than they know that they need to do something different for the existing wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah, and on top of that, we know that we have to replace basically all the utilities in 2 of the buildings we're talking about, because they did have a water damage in a underground transformer vault. So anything that's done with a wastewater treatment plant would be, like Alan said, in conjunction with this. And correct me if I'm wrong, Alan, but we're talking about coming across the existing driveway maybe as utility easement, and everyone could feed off of that. I think
Yeah,
that was
these
an early
are
conversation.
we need input from the light plant on that. The other area of interest, just so this group knows, as part of the public works, is there's been discussion about the existing solar array that's over there. I don't know if you're kind of familiar with it's the same area we're looking to potentially expand wastewater capacity with groundwater discharge. And my understanding is there isn't a lot of value to that solar array. I mean, I think it's aged and defunct, but that's come up. But I'm not sure there's an interest in re-energizing or activating those in any way. But we will, we'll make sure we kind of understand that better as we move forward.
Okay. So we've mentioned the 2229 location, but where would we rank that sort of in terms of level of interest or potential?
So I know there's a history of discussion. In fact, I see Nick Pappas on the line. I'm only calling attention to Nick because Nick was a public works commissioner before I was director. And so he had been engaged in a few areas. And I know public works had discussions. I haven't revisited, I don't believe it was considered particularly a high level of interest. I think part of it was proximity and having all of the operations in one area of town where we serve, more centrally located, is just increase efficiencies and time of response, and travel has always been a concern. But this was back when it was still the future was really uncertain. I'm thinking 10 years ago. And beyond that, I think it was more of just location was a not ideal. Just to but and Nick, I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot. If you're listening, if you have anything you might want to offer just to this group.
Let's see. I'm okay. You're talking about 2229 Main?
Yes, yeah, you may remember, some of those
Yeah,
conversations.
there were really, the primary issue was the location and all of the added travel to get anywhere in town. I mean, you're at an extreme end of town and you're at the end of a road that's you'd be imposing a lot of traffic on the neighbors, and with the development that's happening in West Concord, it just makes that all that much worse. So, but I think at the time when we were discussing it, the main consideration was the extra wear and tear on equipment, the operating cost of more mileage on the road, that sort of thing.
Thanks, Nick. And did I miss anything for this group on the landfill? Again, you were very involved with discussions with
No,
Walden
I
Woods.
think you've covered it pretty well. The one
Okay.
comment I'd make on things you've discussed is the limitations on the current site on Kai's Road. The entire site is in the 100-year floodplain, and the issue of flood storage capacity is a huge issue. And I don't think you can really do anything outside of the existing building envelopes. You could tear down the buildings and rebuild upward, but if you try to decrease the flood storage capacity, you've got no place on that site where you can make up for it. And you'd have to make up for it on the site. So the site's reusable, but you've got to be careful about exactly how you do it and any sequencing of building, tear down and rebuilding so that you retain the grandfathering of the existing buildings.
And I would add, Nick, because that's important, the floodplain is obviously be an issue in our operations, especially with emergency kind of services. But just to the point of paying attention to those regulatory constraints, an example is Baker Ave with the Novo, project. That's in a floodplain. So you can mitigate it, but you have to be able to, understand that's part of any redevelopment of the campus. Thanks, Nick.
And just to be inclusive, we've all been through the Ripley building, or a lot of us have been, and there seems to be a sense that maybe that structure in and of itself doesn't have huge potential. But I guess the question is, would it have enough potential so that some of it could be converted for, large equipment and maintenance functions, plus the administrative functions? And I think it may not be 14 acres, but and again, it does have recreation use abutting the buildings, and so to some extent those might not be compatible, but I'd be interested in any thoughts that people have about that option.
Raise.
Sure, Nick. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just a comment on that. I've watched most of the meetings all the way through, and in discussing that site, the existence of the playing fields there has come up. And a thing I haven't heard discussed is the possibility of moving those playing fields over to that land near the sewage treatment plant where the farmland is now, and then having more land available for development, whether it's for administrative or public works or anything. But I just wanted to put that idea out there as something that may be considered.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And Linda, I have not had it. It hasn't been an internal discussion, but I think the idea is we got to look at all potentials and then say, yeah, we thought about it and pros and cons. So, yeah. So the other discussion that I'm hearing, just to share with this group, is there's costs of repurposing existing infrastructure. And there's also the idea of, well, you just tear it down and rebuild, and that has to be on the radar. So, it speaks to what's the area available, and I guess when you look at pros and cons, that's when you start looking at, well, what's the impact to outside its primary operation, residents, playing fields, all those sorts of things. But I haven't been involved with any discussions about how Public Works would or would not work over at Ripley. That's all I'm saying at this point.
Well, it should be on the list, I think. Because if you look at the different potential options, scenarios, and the consolidation group, and what we know so far about the state of that building, it is something that we need to understand what can be done with building / the land there. And a good point, Nick, on the playing fields is how could we maximize this for other use, instead of building a new building there for I don't know how much money. Yeah.
If you,
So, one thing we've talked about is, these other locations, but, to relocate, but what about what, on the other flip side of it? So say we do, one scenario, we move to MCI. We need to look at what we can give up, and have that listed as part of our scenario too. Properties that we can, turn back so that the town can use to either sell or, for some other use. Like we just talked about the scenario here, giving up the ball fields at Ripley and using the farmland to build the ball fields. In these other scenarios, what other properties will free up? We need to have those listed as well as part of the scenarios.
yeah, I have one more. This is not town-owned land, but I will notice, I used to live on Virginia Road, and there are commercial developments on Virginia Road near the airport that have been extremely unsuccessful financially and have had a huge turnover. And they might be candidates for this or some other purpose for either rental or the buildings and land possibly be purchased by the town. I think it's something that should be looked at because it's not a bad space to put something like Public Works. There's probably not enough space, but it's a thing to look at. Just put it on the list.
Could you share the address? Because that could also be interesting for the municipal transportation.
I'll have to look it up. Hold on.
Yeah.
Give me a
Like
few
a
minutes.
pen.
I think I see what you're talking about.
I,
Because that the one scenario in the municipal consultation group is say the town is renting stuff. And if there's something to rent even for municipal functions in one place. Or ping it later to me via email and I can make sure the municipal group
Yeah.
also knows about it.
Just a moment.
It's a Middlesex Green. Is that what it's called?
Yes, that's it.
Okay,
There may be multiple owners of the property there, but there's on both sides of the road, there are property.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Interestingly, Welch's used to be there before they went to Baker Ave. And there used to be, there've been a lot of different things there and a lot of vacancies.
thank you.
Many of the properties you've talked about, bothering the neighbors is a big issue. The worst thing there would be the traffic on Virginia Road, but there's already a lot of heavy traffic on Virginia Road. So I think you've got a case.
Yeah, I don't think that's been on our list. Again, it's, it's at the far extreme of town.
Yeah, but it's not that far from the center and it's not that far from Kai's Road, really. And you don't have to cross Route 2. I mean, it's not as good as Kai's Road in that sense, but it's better than 2229 Main Street.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I think that I found a helpful discussion. I don't know, how we can move all of those forward.
We need to put a list together and
Yeah.
and then have that discussion at the next meeting.
Okay. We need to have a list together and get some, sort of quantifiable aspects from that list in terms of acreage and useful acreage, and then any buildings on the location and sort of what square footage those would be. Trying to think of what other information would be
Mm.
on that list.
I mean, if, we're talking public works, what other, if we go, and I know we're going probably down the rabbit hole here, but if, we go whatever option one is, what can be relocated from Kai's Road and what can't, if we go with that facility versus option two, we can do X, Y, and Z, but we can't do A, B, C, I think we need to, it's gonna be a bit of a process. That's why we can't go with, 15 locations to relocate. We need to narrow it down to like 3 or 4. And that way we can really narrow the band down to these are the locations we're looking at. These are the things we can move to these locations. And this is what if we do these moves, this is what we can free up potentially for the town to use for other things, whether it's another, one of the other committees can use it for, or the property gets sold.
Right, to offset some of the expenses that one way or other are going to be generated by this process if it's successful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, well, that's good. Shall we move on?
So,
Okay, so I think the next, I think we're probably at a point where we could discuss the quarterly report comments. I don't know if Shannon shared comments that I had or not, or if I can. Screen share. I don't know if I can. Hold on. I'm sorry. I'm not.
Are you able to see the share? Or you have control or not, or
I'm
can't find it?
not sure how to.
At the bottom of the screen, do you see a band of raised hand, chat, share? I don't know if you, I
Oh.
don't know if you even have the capability. I'm not sure if I can, let me see. I can do anything on that.
I think let me see.
Okay, yep, you got it.
Yep.
You got it.
Okay. All right.
Yep, you're good.
So I had just a couple of comments on our section for Public Works. Okay, so I don't know. Can people see these comments?
Yep,
Mhm.
yep, we can read it.
Okay, so I think I said I think I had 4 comments. Here I said, would it be useful to include interaction between the Public Works Department and other departments? And I guess our discussion led us to say no, that really isn't a salient point that
Well,
really.
let me clarify, because this is good to have
Okay.
these points. So, you know, the focus on, there is interaction on planning levels. So, you know, both, just to be clear, our divisions have gotten so complex. Water sewer has someone who will attend planning meetings. Engineering has someone who will attend planning meetings. So with engineering, it's right away, site plan review, stormwater kind of activity. With water, wastewater, it's usually on, you know, sort of the larger projects on infrastructure impacts and demands and needs. So engineering and water sewer have a high level of planning that is nice to be able to coordinate with the planning, NRC, Board of Health. So it just, you know, an ideal situation, you know, it's convenient where they're close by. But I will also tell you, we have interactions with the finance department as well, you know, and, you know, so some of these things can be done and addressed virtually, but I don't want to ignore the fact that there is that cross coordination. But I think, I don't know how best to frame it, but sort of there's the day-to-day communications versus the every couple days communication, it may be. And it's, we also live the way our environment allows us to live. So this is what we're used to, right?
Right.
So, I don't know another alternative. Well, I do know, I can share this. The experience I had when I was water sewer temporarily over by the depot, and that was when I was first hired, was really challenging to be coordinated with the rest of the rest of Public Works, the director, highway grounds. I felt very isolated and it wasn't helpful. It was very good to be brought to the campus. So that's experience. But, you know, just to be clear, these other departments, we do have interactions and, you know, need to be mindful of that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. The other point I thought that could be made was that the economics of operating on a site that's so constrained is costly. You know, between you higher costs for materials because you have to order smaller amounts, and then of course equipment that is not properly, not optimally managed because it has to be outdoors. There's not enough indoor space or, you know, mechanical rooms that can get to um, uh,
A lot of shuffling, a lot of reorg, and, you know, it's literally move one piece of equipment to put another one in. It's inefficient on that level, very inefficient.
Another thing was that safety issue of cross traffic between public access and operations. And then the shortage of wastewater treatment in terms of having issues in terms of long-term sustainability. You know, that didn't come through. There wasn't the idea of, you know, if we have better functioning wastewater treatment for public works, it's not just public works, it's sustainability across the town. And, you know, we've already seen people who think public works is going to expand. We've already gotten, you know, letters from people who say, you know, can my street be on the sewer system first once it's expanded? So people are interested in that. So those are my comments. I don't know, Rob, or if you had any thoughts
No.
you want to add, or anyone else would want to give feedback to this quarterly report. But those were the issues I had. So
I'm fine with the added comments there. And I think, you know, showing that we have to be inefficient the way we are, the cost isn't, shown, but it's there, that we're paying for things and there's an opportunity to, save money down the road.
Yeah. I don't know if we can quantify that. I know a lot of the groups are looking at more quantifying what the actual operating costs of running the buildings as they are now. And I assume that there's some inefficiencies in running old buildings that, updating buildings in terms of their functioning, even though we've got, great facilities management going on, we're still not state of the art in terms of sustainability with the buildings and efficiencies. So yeah. Okay, well, we'll go with that. And then I guess the next issue would be public comment, and see if I can stop my screen sharing here.
Yep.
And I'd certainly welcome public comment from Sven or Judith in terms of things that you see. Our committee is a little behind. We wish it were not that case, but any ideas that you have that you've seen with other committees as well. But I see Nick has a
Yeah, one more thing on the spirit of other people's land that might be useful. Maybe you could do a deal. The tennis club on Old Bedford Road, if that were available, I know they've had problems there. They came to Natural Resources Commission with some water, some flooding on part of their property. But looking at the maps, there really isn't any obvious serious problem with flooding there. And the Natural Resources couldn't allow what they wanted to do. I don't know if that property might be available, but it would give you a wonderful access to Old Bedford Road and not have to drive through more residential going in and out of the Ripley site. And it abuts the Ripley site, interestingly. It's 155 Old Bedford Road. That's all.
thanks.
Good find. So on my end, yeah, you given the reshuffle we had on the people on this subgroup and the challenges in getting all of you together, yes, you're in a certain way behind. On the other end, you have a very kind of focused subject. Whereas like if you look to the municipal consolidation group, which is I think the farthest in their work, they have a much, much, much broader puzzle to solve. So it works for you that you have kind of a very focused task here. To see is how it works with other subgroups. And you mentioned that already, making a list of the different properties you have in mind, being able to describe them, having some criteria, how you want to evaluate them and what information you need, and then start to prioritize, as you mentioned, down to a manageable number of options. And some you might want to classify as joker or so. Yeah. So I don't know, for example, that tennis club scenario could be a joker option.
Mhm.
You have to think about it how you want to narrow the scope down and prioritize without losing potentially options that suddenly come up. But in the core, it's the understanding, as you said, how much room do you need? How many functions need to be together? What's the minimum size? I know, Alan, you're always saying 14 acres, but can it be less? Yeah. So we have to challenge Alan here a bit. I think in this whole process, overall, across all groups, there is some give and take. Not everyone will get their perfect wish list. And that's not only financial reasons, but also what is available from the land and what is practically available and on a timeline available. So I would say feel free to challenge Alan on his demands.
Oh, I comment, please. This isn't about Alan. Russ, where did
Yeah, I know, but I know
where
it's
did you
like
get 14 acres? Isn't that from the report? I didn't get the report.
Yeah, no,
I'm
it is,
hoping I'm not the source either.
no, it is from the report, but that's why we want to update that report number and make sure that it's viable.
I'll accept it as the face of Public Works, but that's it. That's it.
Judith, thanks for joining us today. I'm so grateful that you're on.
Oh, well, I just wanted to chime in and say that I hope your subgroup doesn't feel that you're too far behind the 8 ball, because you did have some special circumstances, with regard to member switch out. But I felt like the conversation that I listened to today was excellent. And I think that part of the challenge with the Public Works element in particular was that a couple of options kind of sprang off the page, and so we almost became preoccupied with the things that were more in play because of other sites and so forth. So the idea that you're now thinking creatively and comprehensively, and really just making sure that you've examined all these different sites, I think is exactly what you should be doing. So I found this conversation excellent today. And I also wanted to thank Nick Pappas for really bringing some, excellent ideas and frankly, some history. I've lived here for 25 years, but there were all kinds of things that Nick was raising that I thought were interesting, with the proviso that if anybody is listening who belongs to the Heritage Swim Club, that we're not coming for you at this point. That might be a bit of a risky one to float out there, but I think the conversation is excellent and you guys are heading in the right direction. So I for one am feeling very renewed and optimistic.
Great. Well, that's important that we all feel that way because it's a rare commodity these days. So I want to thank everybody and say we'll move along, and I think we will. We've got our next steps in terms of coming up with that list, in populating it with information, whereby we can come up with a pretty short list, and we'll just coordinate with what's going on at MCI Concord as best we can as well. So thank you all, and we'll call it a night. Have a good evening, everybody.